Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. Last episode we talked about the best soldiers in Star Wars. I explained to you guys what my ideal private army would look like. Today we're going to continue that series by looking at the best starfighters in the Star Wars galaxy. Now, in an ideal world, we would create a starfighter that could fit multiple roles like Interceptor, ground attack, fighter, bomber, air superiority, space superiority, reconnaissance, and all that. Having just one type of starfighter would make training, maintenance, and logistics much easier. It means the commander will never have the wrong tool for the job. It also means you'll have a craft that is average at just about everything, without excelling in anything, which means you're settling. And one should never settle when creating a fictional private starfighter corps in a YouTube video. I think the ideal fighter wing would be made up of a mixture of organic and mechanical fighters. Droid fighters are much cheaper to manufacture. There is no pilot that needs to undergo thousands of hours of training. And because there is no pilot, these droid ships don't need a cockpit, life support, and can withstand much more intense environments and maneuvers. My ideal droid starship would be the Tri-Fighter, and around 5 meters long, these were amongst the smallest ships seen during the Clone Wars. Armed with a powerful array of blaster cannons, buzz droids, and an upgraded droid brain, the Tri-Fighter would be the ideal wingman for any organic pilot. I would deploy these Tri-Fighters to support more vulnerable starfighters, and I would also use them en masse for anti-ship defense of larger vessels. These Tri-Fighters do have some limitations because they are mechanical, their flight patterns are oftentimes more predictable, they also lack the range and hyperdrive of larger organic piloted ships. Ideally, these droid fighters can be tethered to other ships until they are engaged in combat. For the Interceptor role, I would choose the RZ-1A wing, the fastest starship to be used by either side during the Galactic Civil War. The A-Wing was not only fast, but it also had proper life support, shielding, and a hyperdrive. I'm not really sure how the quad engineers were able to fit all that into such a small package. The A-Wing was used so successfully by the Rebel Alliance that the Imperial Navy was forced to introduce their own TIE Interceptor, which still was slower than the A-Wing and lacked both a hyperdrive, shielding, and a full life support system. Now for the space superiority role, I looked at a lot of different starfighters, including some old Republic designs, Mandalorian ships. I even looked at the legendary Chiss Clawcraft. But nothing says space superiority like a T-65 X-Wing. It just goes to show you how advanced the Rebel Alliance lineup of starships was compared to the Empire. The only thing they really lacked were enough skilled pilots to keep their starfighters in the air. The X-Wing was a highly maneuverable craft and was both heavily armed and shielded. It had an extremely long range, robust life support, and a slot for astromechs, which meant not only could it engage and destroy enemy starfighters, it could do it for a much longer time than the average craft. The X-Wing, like the A-Wing, also had the ability to carry out missions without the support of larger craft thanks to built-in hyperdrives. This also meant when a fleet arrived into a system, all the Rebel fighters were already starting their attack runs, and not stuck in some hangar bay, giving them a huge advantage in the opening moments of a battle. For the fighter-bomber role, we're not going to go with the Y-Wing. Instead, we're going to look at the Mandalorian kom'rk class fighter. Officially, this is a heavily armed assault ship fighter hybrid, but I would simply change its payload from Mandalorian jetpack trooper to proton torpedoes. The kom'rk class fighter had a ridiculously powered sublight engine and a very uniquely designed wing that rotated around the fuselage, giving the ship much more maneuverability than a ship of that size should have. Place a pair of droid Tri-Fighters on its wing and you have a ship that's able to deliver a lot of ordnance and get home safely. For in-atmosphere superiority, I would use the TIE Striker. It's one of the few starships in Star Wars that actually is designed to fly in atmosphere, and doesn't solely rely on inertial dampeners and pure thrust power to fly. Combine that with a large payload, the TIE Striker also has the ability to perform as a ground strike aircraft. Although before the TIE Striker can make any low-altitude bombing runs, it would probably need some shields. For a ground attack, this is where we would use the BLT Y-Wing. With heavy shielding, rugged armor, a large payload, and a very low flight speed, the Y-Wing was ideally suited for ground attack missions and close air support. Like the Rebel Alliance, I would remove the turret gunner and add additional shielding to the bottom of the craft to protect it from ground fire. For troop transport, we're going to have to go with the UT-60D. Unlike the First Order lander, it had a less suicidal side exit door, and unlike the clone LAAT, it was a capable fighter that could hold its own should it come under attack from other starfighters. The UT-60D also featured a decent assortment of weapons, including door gunners, which help provide covering fire when unloading or picking up passengers. The only shortcoming of the UT-60D was its limited payload. Realistically, I would use the LAAT to supplement the UT-60D, especially reconfigured variants that can lift walkers and other larger vessels into battle. Also, the kom'rk class fighter packed with jetpack troopers would be very useful when attempting to board an enemy ship or space station. To protect and screen my fleet, I would use the ARC-170 as a long-range patrol craft, featuring a robust life support system hyperdrive and a very powerful sensor package. The ARC-170 could be deployed for long missions to look out for enemy scouts and fleets. The fighter has a crew of 3 which can operate in shifts, further extending its operation time, and if the ARC-170 encounters enemy combatants, it's heavily armed and shielded and can deal with most threats, or at least survive long enough to escape. For recon and surveillance, I would use the GAR's experimental stealth ship, which later served as the template for Tarkin's carry-on Spike. With active cloaking and jamming, the ship could infiltrate enemy fleets and systems covertly. Should it be discovered, it's heavily armed and shielded enough to survive most encounters. Another interesting alternative would be the XWing Coral Skipper. These organic living ships are extremely durable and can very easily look like a piece of space debris or a small space rock. Because of the ship's organic matter, it's very hard to detect with sensors, especially if you don't know what to look for. The only problem with the Coral Skipper is that it lacks a hyperdrive. On a side note, the reason I didn't select any old Republic ships is simply because their designs and technology is a bit antiquated compared to the Galactic Civil War era and even the Clone Wars era. Although for several thousands of years old designs, they are still surprisingly potent. It seems like Star Wars suffers from an extreme case of technological stagnation. Well guys, let me know in the comment section below what kind of ships will be in your ideal Starfighter Corps. Also, don't forget to subscribe and like us on Facebook so you don't miss out on the rest of this series where we will be covering naval ships, and maybe we'll do another video on ground vehicles. Well guys, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.